6:30. We're going to call the meeting to order. Audio check. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Test. If you all can make sure the blue lights on your microphones are on, that should indicate they are working.
It was green.
Check 1, 2.
It's on now.
Do we have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda for this evening? Anybody?
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nay. Passes unanimously. This is the time for our public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to make some public comment?
If you could grab the microphone here.
This solves the problem. I was going to say, when people ask a question on Zoom and you answer it and we don't know what the question was, it doesn't. So I got it. You already solved the problem. Thank you.
Do we have anyone on Zoom who wants to make a comment?
No.
Okay, it's time to look at our previous minutes. And do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
To approve or second.
Okay, we have a move, we have a second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Let's move on to our new business. We have a public hearing for the variances at these two locations. Nate, you want to proceed with that?
Yes, you would need to call the public hearing to order.
Public hearing is called to order.
At 6:32, and so this notice of public hearing has been posted at Town Hall, the website, and the post office for the required 15 days. This is basically for two variances for 11110 and 11120 Belvedere Avenue. The McSpaddens own both cabins. They have decks on both cabins, and both cabins are in need of deck replacement. And this is a situation where some survey work was done, ILCs were created, and it basically it was found out that not only are the decks at least the decks, if not the portions of the cabins themselves, are in fact in town right of way. So basically, for anything to move forward development wise on this property, we will need some variances for the front setbacks on both properties, as well as easements if the town wishes to grant those. I'm bringing up here on the screen the survey documents that show the encroachments onto town right of way with the easement areas. And we can talk more about the easement areas in a few minutes. This portion of the meeting is specifically for public comment for the variances themselves. Is there anyone here that wishes to give public comment on the variances? Not seeing any. The McSpaddens are the only ones on the Zoom meeting at the moment. I was just showing this to the commission just to kind of prep for the conversation. But since we don't have any public comment here, we can close the public hearing. at 6:35. And we can move on to the next
Oh, sorry.
item, which will be the actual discussion and potential approval of the items. So I just gave kind of a summary here and of the situation. The applicant had a architectural review at a previous meeting for 11110. That was approved. However, when they went and got the survey work done, they discovered that the original drawings submitted were not accurate. So now we're in a position where, essentially the variances and easements are required for both of this development to occur. If it were a relatively simple repair, then it would essentially be a non-conforming use that could continue if it was minor repairs to the deck. But since the decks have to be completely rebuilt, then it's a situation where the existing code has to be followed. So that's the situation we're in. The two items up for review tonight are basically the variance, first of all, that we had the public hearing for, as well as the proposed easements. The easements, the process that had been outlined is for basically a 3-step process, which would be a conceptual agreement for the easements or a conceptual approval identified here on the screen. So step 1, concept approval. And if that concept is approved, the second presentation would be to Planning Commission, and that would include a very specific legal description for the easements that requires further survey work from the applicant. And then step 3, assuming all of those pass, step 3 would be submitting to the Board of Trustees for a decision. So all the fees have basically been paid for the variances and the easements themselves. I guess at this point, I would recommend approval of the variances and the easements, the easement concepts, I should say. Again, the McSpaddens are on the line, and I'm open to questions.
So Nate, this is Rocco. You said the existing conditions are non-conforming use. That's because it doesn't meet setback requirements for structure, correct?
Yes,
And that's not only the deck, that's the main building itself.
correct.
Okay. And I mean, I walk by that building, those buildings most every day. That looks like they've been there for quite a long time. And it's probably not the only building in town in that situation.
Not the only building on that street.
And it also looks like the deck and the staircases have been there quite a long time, to the point where the owner needs to do a renovation of that portion.
Mhm.
Okay.
They are putting the decks back same shape as they are now. Is that correct? They're not changing the pattern.
Correct. Same footprint on
Okay.
both properties for the decks.
Okay.
That sounds good to me too. I'm glad we can help out the older buildings that have these odd things that have been there for so long.
In the past couple of years, from what I've seen, the revocable permit has been used as a mechanism to do these things. I know that a couple of them were initiated. But I just don't feel like the revocable permit is the way to go, especially with a permanent structure. Because that in itself indicates that it would be relatively easy for the town to revoke the permit, which would obviously not be a good thing for a permanent structure. So I've kind of moved into the habit of preparing these easement agreements, because the easements then are essentially documents that are recorded and stay with the property. So in future sales, title searches, things like that, should uncover those, or should identify those easement agreements with the property, so that future surveys don't indicate a red flag with encroachment.
Is there a fee? I didn't quite catch that. Do they have to pay for an easement?
Right now, the easement fee is $50 a year.
And they pay that every year forever, or?
Yeah, I think that should be changed myself,
Yeah.
just as an administrative hassle. Doesn't seem worth it, but they've paid the $50 to this point for this year.
Was that the fee for the revocable permit too?
Revocables are $200
Oh,
a year.
200, that's right, yeah. Well, maybe that can be addressed, so it just goes with the land forever, somehow. I don't know.
So, do the residents want to make any comments?
Hi, Bruce, if
These
you're there,
cabins
you-
were,
go ahead.
these cabins were built 1900 and 1912. So to our knowledge, I think what they did was back them up to where they thought was appropriate, but I don't think anybody really went by the survey back then. We've had them since 1993 and have kind of jury rigged the decks. We are replacing them with composite materials and with fireproof materials, so it will be better quality. And we did go to the fire mitigation meeting there and have had, what was the guy's name there? Adrian up to the place. And they are the exact footprint, not 1 inch added on. What else did we say there? I think that's it.
Kudos to you for using fire resistant materials. So do we have a motion?
Could I just clarify the process again?
Mhm.
When you, back in the other, page 8 of the agenda, you said that they'd need a survey, step 1, step 2. You didn't say this is completed. That has been completed, right?
This tonight would be, if you approve the easement concept, and the next step for that will be coming back to planning commission with the easement step 2, which is basically all the formal documentation which will include a complete and accurate legal description. And then step 3 would be that easement, if approved at planning commission, all that documentation then being presented to the board, for their decision. The variance is different, is kind of separate, although necessary
Okay.
for all of this, but the variance just requires public hearings here, which we just did, and then at the next board meeting. And so that will kind of has a slightly different approval track.
Yeah,
if
I
you will.
understand that. I'm just wondering what these legal documents are because they have done a survey. It's with our packet.
Right, but the actual legal
Needs to be a
description needs to
Okay.
be written
So
out
that's what we'll see
in a
next time.
way, yeah, that,
And then, okay, thank you.
and then that takes a little bit more work.
Just wanted the details
Yeah,
about that.
to
Thank
do.
you for the process.
Correct.
I move approval of staff's recommendation on this.
A second.
All in favor?
I'd like to make an amendment.
Yes.
I'd like to amend the movement to waive future annual easement fees.
For this one situation.
for the item under discussion.
Do we have any discussion about that?
Well, I suppose that's a good idea, and then you can just do it for everybody every time.
Well, no,
It's-
this is for this case. I think we have to go case by case until the town revises
Oh,
the,
until, so,
the
but
fee.
until, if someone else came tomorrow and wanted that, we'd do the same thing.
Correct. And we would just advise the board that that
Yeah,
motion was passed presumably by the planning commission with the waiver of future fees in this case. And then if that's a practice that the
oh, I see.
PC and board want to continue, then that could happen until possibly the fees are removed from code,
But the board would decide that.
but the
if it-
board would have the final decision.
On this would too, I suppose.
Yeah, because this is essentially a
Recommendation.
recommendation, if you will.
That's
Okay, we have a motion, we have an amendment. Do I have a second to the motion with the amendment?
Second.
All in favor of this motion with the amendment, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Nay.
Just a clarification. So Mike made the original motion. Should we consider Rocco making the new motion?
Mhm.
Mike second. Okay, thank you. All right, Bruce and Marilyn, thank you. I think you heard those next steps, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me and I'll include you in the board packet reminder for the variance and the meetings that are coming up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You.
Have a good day.
You too. Okay, we're ready to move on to application 20220804.
All right, so this is a similar situation, except there's no existing deck here, but the applicant, Don Hayes, this has been going on for a while. I just haven't been clear on how to deal with this situation until now and until researching all these other situations, but he would like to put a deck on the front of his house at 10565 Foster. And again, similar situation. We'll get the site here. This is the pictures of the house here. Just so for location reference, sorry, these didn't condense. So that's the front of the house. So the deck would be underneath these two windows protruding out into the right of way, although as I mentioned in the staff report, not what I consider the functional right of way. The deck itself would protrude. Basically, I had this measuring stick out there. There's the 16-foot mark from the house, which is the length of the deck. So you can see it's still within that grassy knoll in front of the house. This ILC document here gives better detail of it. So you can see the 16-foot measurement from the house to the edge of the deck, proposed deck. And the easement then itself needs to be 12 feet out from the right of way in order to accommodate this design. There is this electric vault here. And so I did recommend in the staff report that I recommend approval of the easement, but without this eastern portion of it to basically stop at the edge of this. This is the basically the landing out the front door, and then you kind of turn left, walk down these steps. Because of this electric vault here and the utility concern there, I would recommend just cutting this easement off essentially in line with this front stoop landing here, if granted. I can show you here. This is data from the CSU, Colorado Springs Utilities GIS site. So this intersection here, the red are utility lines, dashed lines indicate underground, turns to solid here where there's a utility pole in this vicinity. I can't say exactly how accurate these lines are, but it does indicate obviously a utility electric junction here where that box is. And so this is where that underground utility goes in front of the house. The measurement is just taken from this building footprint from the GIS data that CSU provides out to the location of the underground utility there. That indicates a distance of 21.14 feet, which would leave, in theory, about 5 feet of space between the edge of the deck and where the underground utility exists. I would probably question the exact, I just don't know how accurate those utility lines are. I don't have that information from CSU. So I guess I would have, there could be some question on the interference in case, CSU had to dig into that street to get to that electric, then that could potentially be a conflict here.
So have we contacted CSU to see what their rules are about protecting all this?
I've reached out to them. I haven't heard back. I'm just starting to get those lines of communication going because there are more and more of these requests coming up. But I wanted to get this on the agenda because Don Hayes has been waiting for quite a while for me to figure this out. So I at least wanted to start the conversation for him.
Nate, thanks for walking us through this picture. Could we go back to the survey document?
Mhm.
Okay, so we have two thick black lines in front of the property. Is the one closest to the structure the property line?
Yes. This
And
is
the one
property line.
furthest out would be if an easement was granted into that section of the existing public right of way.
Correct.
Okay.
And Nate, is there where's the right of way? Up there.
The
So
right-
it's clear out there?
Yeah, well, see, that's the common sort of dilemma we have here is that I call the functional right of way where traffic actually is and where the concrete is basically. But in this case, the right of way ends here and that whole grassy knoll, even where these steps exist right now, that is technically within the town right of way. So, that is available for utility use and any, town road maintenance, drainage, anything like that would need to occur along this section of street. If this easement were granted, there is language in the easement document that sort of gives the town an out, but it wouldn't be it would be a process. It wouldn't be, necessarily easy to, just come in and say the revocable permit situation would be much easier to reverse and say, sorry, we need this for this major drainage project or street project. That could be a case where a revocable permit is perhaps better if there are concerns with this, in this area of future projects.
Can you tell me what the SLY row line is? What is that?
I'm sorry, southerly right of way.
Southerly.
Mhm.
If, if we grant the permit and the easement and they build a deck and we did a revocable permit, does that mean we'd have to have them tear down the deck? I don't think that's a good idea.
You had mentioned that the situation was similar. I mean, maybe because we had petitions come in to fix an issue on the right of way. I see that's the difference with what we just approved in this. The issue on Belvedere that we just voted on was fixing a messy situation that's existed for a long time. This I see as fundamentally different, granting someone permission to build into the public right of way. And so I think that's a fundamental difference, potentially creating a mess in the future.
Right.
Well, and I do want to remind this commission that we haven't talked at all tonight, but previously we've talked about fire mitigation and firefighting issues about getting trucks up and down the right of way. We already are too narrow as it is to get our fire trucks up and down to fight a fire. So that's a concern as well.
Yeah, there's a fence on the other side and it is pretty narrow. It's right there.
Where'd you say?
There is a fence that borders the park,
Mm-hmm.
right there. And I drove it today and it's narrow.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to kind of jog around a car that's parked there. Like that truck, so. Correct, Nick? I mean.
Correct, yes, there's
Yeah, you can
usually,
See, yeah, you can see the fencing up there. So it's not, if it were just an open field, you could just plow a fire truck through that or whatever, but not through the fence.
Was this the backside?
this is the front, this is right on the street. It's just the conceptual drawing, just kind of, you know,
Drawing.
this is the conceptual drawing of the deck. This is the actual front of the house.
Yeah.
Whoops. And this is This is the- this is the truck that's typically parked there. Usually there is a vehicle parked there. I don't necessarily disagree with any of the concerns that have been raised.
I mean, if we did a revocable one and also chose not to charge the fee every year, he would understand that it was his risk to go ahead and build that. And then if there was an issue for the best good of the town, which is what a right of way is there for, and he had to remove it, it would just be
That's a good idea.
his choice. It would be his choice to take that risk.
That's a good idea.
I think the property owner took the risk buying this property and it's hemmed in. They had issues with the septic a few years ago. They had to cram that in on the side yard. And you've got that major electrical junction box right out in front. So there's a lot of things. And then I think, let the buyer beware, it's a small lot.
Well,
Yeah, when he bought it, he knew where the property line was.
Or
Is-
or
is-
should have.
Is the owner on the line or available?
No, the owner did not join. I did include him in the email with the agenda and everything.
could I ask a question?
Sure.
Did you say that this was an ILC?
Well,
property?
the survey document is what was prepared.
What's
I
the
don't-
difference between a survey and an ILC?
The ILC is generally a quicker project or a quicker product that is kind of it's a 2-scale drawing. And sometimes when they only find like one pin or something, it's not a full survey where they reference
Yeah.
historical records and find every single pin and like
Did they
do the
then do
full.
a survey from an ILC if they sold it? How does that work?
Usually, sometimes like title companies will, like in a mortgage purchase, a title company could require an ILC to be done or some survey work so that encroachments are, or any potential problems are identified. An ILC is a cheaper alternative to a full survey, but it doesn't guarantee the full results of that a full survey does. It's kind of a reference map for most likely what the situation is with the survey. And for the record, I don't disagree with any of the concerns that have been brought up tonight.
Foster's a pretty busy street as well.
Do people go by there a lot to
Mhm.
cut over to
Mhm.
Hondo?
It's that main triangle, the flagpole park,
Yeah.
right next to the lakeside cottages. So there's quite a bit of traffic there.
Yeah. People might run into his deck.
I just think my main concern is checking with CSU as well.
Yeah, and I could continue that conversation. I hope to kind of open those lines of communication up for this and future projects. I just hadn't heard back definitively on anything from them yet. But yes, it should be a part of the report, should be what CSU or Black Hills have
There
to
may be
say.
some legal, like you can't do anything by their lines or, so far from them or.
Generally, they would have a utility easement or something would be recorded. And that in theory should show up on plats and work done by it, but not necessarily an ILC. So yeah,
Maybe we
there's a
could
lot of
table it
questions
till-
that should probably be answered on this one.
Have you asked them to come out and paint the line so that we know exactly where it is?
No, I haven't.
I move, yeah, go ahead.
So do we want to
So
make a motion? Rocco, do you,
I'll
Haven't-
move to deny the request as submitted.
okay, do we have a second? I will second that. Everyone in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Nay,
all right, I will advise the applicant and we can talk about different alternatives. And if I hear something more concrete from CSU, then we can revisit the conversation.
I think it's also important for the applicant to be present and if he really wants it, to talk to us
Right.
and hear all our concerns and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. We are now moving into old business. And we're pretty much on time for what we told Austin. Are we ready to start that? Is Austin on the line?
Yes, he is. Let me get him up on the screen. Austin, I'm gonna put you on the projection here so we can hopefully see you. That's not you. All right, there you are.
And can you guys hear me all right?
We
Yes.
can.
And we can see you, so.
Austin, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Austin is an associate attorney and land use specialist with Flanagan. No, his last name is Flanagan of Hoffman, Parker, Wilson, and Canterbury. The law firm out of Denver that this town contracts with for legal work. And Austin, Lisa and I had a discussion with you previously. You might, for the benefit of the rest of the commission, kind of talk about some of the points that we covered. And I don't know, you may have had some thoughts since we talked, but to start with, talk about, if you don't mind, discussing sort of your assessment of our current situation and what your recommendations are, I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you all for having me and taking the time to talk about this issue today. So I think that the work that the previous consultant did sets you guys up for some good basic provisions. There's some good work that was done there for sure. And so we don't need to throw it all out, but I do think that there could be a lot more tailoring that aligns with the town's needs and aligns with some of the goals in the comprehensive plan. And I understand that that is some of the direction that the Planning Commission members have expressed. So the way I see it now is that we have a working document that we can either A, continue in and critique, or B, decide to move to a new document, perhaps like a bare bone kind of outline of a general organization, and then start bringing over the provisions that you do like in the current draft, and then working towards those more tailored provisions and the provisions that honestly were just kind of maybe left out of the draft that you guys want to see, especially looking at some of those goals again in the comprehensive plan. And so I'm interested to hear from all of you what some of the big goals are outside of the comprehensive plan. Again, I've looked at that and I know those goals. I'm happy to hear which of those that you are most interested in prioritizing through this process, but I'd love to know if there's some other things, some other pressing issues that you guys would like to discuss and make sure that you get into this draft. So again, taking a step back, I think the first kind of step would be if we want to continue on in the current draft that was given by the previous consultant, or work through a new document that has kind of a base organization, and you all, or I can actually just look at your comments and kind of get a good sense of the provisions you did like and the ones you didn't. I can take over the provisions that you did like or seem to not comment that you didn't like. And we can start working from there, from a new kind of cleaner version, or we can work in the structure that you're currently in. So that's, I think, step one. Step two is I'd love to hear from you all about some of the big priorities for this project. So for example, affordable housing was something that was listed in the comprehensive plan as a goal of the town moving forward to encourage more affordable housing. I'd love to know how you guys see that play out in practice, how you think the town can encourage affordable housing in a way that still keeps with the character of the town and is a way that is palatable for the community. And so that can come in a lot of different flavors. So just an example, and there's a whole lot that we can get into tonight. So I know I think the intent is to keep it more high level tonight, and I'll come back with hopefully either that version of the code you have right now with the provisions you do like and a couple more added in, or a new version of the code, whichever you all decide is most appropriate.
Austin, I'll jump in real quickly and then I'll let others ask questions or make comments. This whole land use code rewrite has several goals. One is that it's easily enforced, that we remove the inconsistencies that there are in the codes, and that it is simple and easily understood, which therefore makes it more easily enforced. So those are the high level goals that we've had in this process. Who on the commission wants to make comments or ask questions of Austin? To get it started, Austin, maybe just tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, and maybe they won't be shy here in a minute. Tell us a little bit about your previous experience with, now he is an attorney, but talk to us about when you weren't an attorney and just let us know your experience a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So right now at Hoffman, Parker, Wilson, and Carberry, I do still focus on land use. This is the practice I've developed. It's what I studied in law school. It's what I enjoy doing. So I'm a land use attorney by every means. Prior to joining this firm, I was at a firm called Clarion Associates, which is a national consulting firm that primarily works on land use code rewrites throughout the country. And so there I worked on drafting land use codes for communities all throughout the country. And so some of those could be a lot more tailored and for particular issues, say again, for affordable housing, a community just wants to know how to incentivize affordable housing. So Clary and Associates would come in and redraft provisions in the code just that gets at that issue. But more often it was a full code rewrite. So just like the project we're contemplating here, and it was for rural communities, counties, very large cities, pretty much everything along the spectrum. And the thing I love about land use is that it really is different in every single case. It's never the same. Always communities want to approach issues a little bit differently in a way that will work for their community. And that's the fun part to me. And so I'm excited to understand a little bit more about how the town's preferences for approaching these big issues.
Austin, can you also talk about how many projects you have worked with that are like our rural town? Because that's one of the issues that we've had with, and I can tell you for the entire commission, that's one of the issues we've had is we feel like it's overly complicated and we feel like it's been written for a larger town than ours is.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very common amongst these projects, honestly, especially when you get attorneys to draft them, probably more so than when you get a consultant group to draft them. And so I think part of the benefit is that I have that previous experience with consultants and knowing how to tailor those codes in that way. I'll give you one example of the most recent code I drafted. I drafted it from scratch. It was a town called, or is a town called Araba in Colorado. It's a town of only a couple hundred people. And they wanted something very similar to what you're asking for, very simple. They don't have zoning right now. And so they wanted a really basic list of zoning districts. They wanted to minimize nonconformities as much as possible, but they wanted to start thinking about reducing incompatibilities moving forward. And so the code was really written for those particular issues. Very simple. The streamlines are incredibly streamlined. And the standards themselves are pretty bare boned. They get at that general issue, the general issue of compatibility. And so it doesn't go into a lot of other issues that zoning codes might. For instance, it sounds like fire protection is a pretty big issue in your community, as it probably should be. And that's something that's mentioned a lot in the comprehensive plan. And so that solution will look very different for your community than it will a different community. You know, Araba didn't even address wildfire protection or defensible space standards or anything like that. But for your community, it is more appropriate. And it's something that we'll probably have to think hard about and how it will work for this community.
Questions?
I do. Yes. Simplification and enforcement of the code. We all talk about worrying how to get rid of our dead trees and how to enforce those kind of things. And so we have a fire mitigation committee that's working hard on that. One of my concerns too is that evacuation of the town, not exactly population control. I wouldn't put it that hard, but I'm a little concerned about if we allow more planned PUDs and condos, once we've opened that door, that can be enforced by a developer.
Right.
If we don't put it in the code, is my understanding, they could come with a proposal, but the trustees could make a decision. Maybe it wasn't safe for the town. Am I right on that or not?
Yeah, I think you're right. A plan unit development is just a tool to create a district of your own liking. So it's a developer's tool to say, none of the districts in your code are going to work for my development. I want to create my own. I've worked a lot in communities of getting rid of plan unit developments altogether. And there's a lot of communities that don't have it for the reasons that you're stating. It can be pretty difficult to enforce the standards in a PUD moving forward. And a lot of times you end up with a district that might not emulate the standards of the town quite like you want them to. If you still want to allow PUDs, but get at that issue, you can write a standard for the approval of PUDs that it must take into account fire mitigation, and you can list particular metrics to which they must follow for all PUDs. It's one example.
Well, I think they're trying that. I think you've probably been here, but Highway 24 is very crowded. It's hard to get people out of here right now. And I just thought I would mention that, you know, as we want more and more development, we have to be mindful of public safety.
Right.
That's all.
Do you have other questions, comments?
Yeah, hi, Rocco Blasi. Question, do you or your firm have experience writing fire mitigation language into land use code?
Yep. So one example I'll give is when I worked with Larimer County, and this was just a couple of years ago when they were having very bad fires. And so it was a hot button issue, but it was a tough political issue, to be honest with you, because a lot of the folks in the county, especially the more rural areas, didn't want to see many standards whatsoever, much less standards having to do with what sorts of vegetation was allowed. And the way that the standards were written was a very tailored approach, basically saying, if you can show us a plan that your fire mitigation is better than ours, better than the county standards, then you can follow your own. And so we tried to stake that middle ground of folks that really didn't want to be told what to do, but we still needed to elevate this policy goal of protecting the community. And of course, the resources of fire protection is community felt. It's not just property specific. So that was a method that we found in Larimer County that seemed to work. It gave property owners the ability to submit their own plan for wildlife or wildfire protection. But the default was defensible space standards and other types of standards along those lines for all folks in the county.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mike, you have any questions, comments?
No.
Lisa?
Not right now, thanks.
I have one more. I'd like to ask your opinion about, have you worked with communities, for instance, like ours? How do we try to plan for affordable housing? How can we do that and do it safely for this valley town?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a whole lot of tools at your disposal to get at affordable housing. Some of them come by setting up a general fund, like a fee and lieu process for new developments, where the town has more control over purchasing developments for affordable housing. But that takes a lot of work and that takes a lot of upkeep. Another method of getting at affordable housing is to do deed restrictions depending on the type of development. I'm honestly not sure either of those tools would be suitable for the town, to be honest. And so I think it would take a little bit more conversation on what affordable actually means to the town. I think it means a lot of different things to different people. And so if really what it means is we want to make sure that the people working in the town can afford to live here, then I think there's methods we can get at workforce housing. And those might be a little bit more approachable to get to. But if it is really widespread affordability,
Can't do that too well, yeah.
yeah, it
Well-
becomes more difficult.
In Woodland Park area, I know they're using a lot of Habitat for Humanity houses.
Right.
And they may be just houses. But the person helps and then they qualify because they are part of a workforce. They can't afford to buy much. I didn't know if we need a code for that or not, but it's just a thought.
Those are typically structured as public-private agreements where the nonprofit, like Habitat for Humanity in that case, is kicking in some funds from their nonprofit fund. And then the municipality to which it's located is also kicking in some funds. So that would probably live outside the land use code if it was structured in that method. But certainly something we can also discuss of how to approach those kind of deals.
Austin, thank you for your thoughtful answers. Couple of more questions that I have. We're under a real time constraint, as I believe you know. I wonder, since we've talked, if you have any more of a sense of the hours that this project would take, and maybe a timing of when you could complete it?
I think we should do it, or my advice, obviously, I'm open to whatever you guys would prefer to do it as far as the process works. I think my advice would be to take a general framework that has styles and formatting already put it, and in the organization that seems to make sense, to create that, which we have in stock at our firm. So that won't be extra hours, but then start moving over the provisions that you do like from the current draft rather than working in the current draft. I think that will be faster for me. But of course, I'm up to whatever you all prefer. That would definitely cut some time for me. And then from there, I think the next step would be coming back, having that draft in front of you, presenting it potentially. And then I would love to be able to ask some really pinpointed questions. All right, so we can go left or right here. Which way would you want to go? And that way we can start dialing down on how we're going to tailor this for the community. And depending on how complicated the left or right is, will really be the threshold for me. That those first two steps shouldn't take me too long. If, again, that's how you propose to go about it, it's totally up to all of you. If we did work in the current draft, I think I would need a little bit more time to flesh that out. But again, totally up to you.
I don't think anybody here is married to the current draft at all.
Okay.
Do we have agreement with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So then I'll plan to get that like kind of backbone outline and start bringing over the provisions and then send you that. And then there will be big gaps in the code of like landscaping, for instance. Hey, these provisions weren't very good in the draft. Do you want these provisions? And if so, let's discuss some methods of going about it. And then when I, come back at our next meeting or whenever it works for all of our schedules, we can start dialing down on, I think this is the type of provision that will work well. And I typically would give you some examples of this is a community that did it very, very simply. This is one that did a little bit more complicated and so on. And you guys can kind of plug and play. Yes, we like that. No, we don't like that, or what have you. I'll take that back, get you another draft. And hopefully at that stage, we're pretty close, depending on if there's still disagreements over some of the policy issues or not. But at that stage, we should be pretty close. I think regardless, by the end of the year, we can have this adopted and approved.
That's very encouraging and very optimistic, and we sort of
Yeah.
have that as our deadline. We have to finish by then.
Mhm.
I think of this, the analogy, because I just got through completely redoing a house. I think of this as sort of the analogy of building a house or remodeling a house. And I never want my contractor waiting on me. I want to be ahead of the contractor, be
Right.
extremely responsive when he needs an answer from me. And so that's what I would hope we can get, that kind of commitment from this commission to, it's going to take that to have this finished timely. How many meetings would you imagine that you would need to have with us?
It will depend on how quickly we resolve the policy issues. I mean, like I've said, I've worked on just affordable housing for months. Like if we can resolve that issue in 20 minutes, then it will go a whole lot quicker. And I think that's true of all of the policy issues that I will present in front of you. It's just, I think, a matter of how quickly I get that direction, honestly.
Also, give me like worst case scenario and best case scenario. We are amazing. We totally know what we want. We all agree. There's no issues. We can just move as fast as you can move. That's best case.
Right.
And then worst case, what would the time, how many hours would it be, and a general idea of cost?
I'm not 100% sure on the exact number of hours. I think if we continue to use Zoom, that will cut down on my traveling costs, which will be largely beneficial. And again, the variability will really be in how difficult we're crafting solutions to the policy issues presented for the community. So if you're getting to really nuanced land use code solutions where you're taking 20 pages on one district, which I hope we don't do. I hope I can get all these districts in a couple of sentences. But again, it's all a matter of the direction I get from all of you, and making sure that we're tailoring it in such a way that makes sense. And so if it turns out that those are fairly straightforward, like for instance, fences, I've drafted a fence provision that is literally 3 sections. I've also drafted fence provisions that are like 30 pages. And so hopefully, if we're tending more to those really streamlined, really simple provisions, then that's really quick. But if we start to pile on more complexity, which again is totally fine, then we've got to add in a little bit more time as well.
Assuming we want really simple, very streamlined, give me best case scenario. I know it's ballpark, but just so we have a basis for our decision. How
So
many hours?
after we talked last, I was curious if I quoted you correctly on how long it took me to draft the town of Erebus code from scratch. And it took me 37 hours. And so again, that's a very simple code. If you want that simple of a code, I can do it in less time because I already have some of the provisions drafted in your current draft. I have a feeling you'll want a little bit more complexity than that. But
Well, we need the
maybe-
fire mitigation piece that they don't have. So that would-
Right, which shouldn't take, a huge amount of time. Again, depending on the complexity. If you do something more complicated like Larimer County, then it's going to take a little bit more time. But if you just say, hey, we love what Larimer County did, bring that over, that's going to take a whole lot less time. So it really just depends on the tailoring. And again, sorry to keep kicking it back to you, but
Well, at least you're giving us a framework. 37 hours is like the simplest. Yes, Ann?
I was just going to ask, back to the affordable housing. Excuse me, that's an issue not only here, but everywhere.
right.
And when you talk about policy issues, that's what you want us to think about too. It isn't just
Correct.
how high a fence is, or if you need a fence or whatever. And I know you have to keep us on the side of the law, so we can't forbid things or whatever, that people are entitled to do. But I'm concerned, this is such an old town, 1880.
Right.
The town was started and lines were just drawn for property. They weren't surveyed, they were just drawn.
Right.
And we have a lot of those issues that we're trying to work on, as Nate and Becky know. And then a lot of them are kind of falling down. They would be considered historic. But if we make them restored to historic proportions, people can't afford to do it.
Right.
So that's a little problem I see with this unique little old tiny bitty town. And if you could help us have policies that are also thoughtful to people, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really tough one. How
Mhm.
historic preservation ordinances conflict with affordable housing goals is a really pressing issue. There's actually an article in the Denver Post just last week about this, and how Denver might be doing something a little bit different with their historic preservation ordinance coming up because of affordability concerns. And so it's a tightrope to walk, but I think as long as I'm getting that direction from you guys, we can do it, and we can come up with a code that will work really well for the community. I'm confident in that. And so far, every code project I've done, they've all been adopted unanimously, and that's something like over 30 codes. And so hopefully we can keep that up
That
here,
sounds
but no
good.
promises.
I think with the idea still of the house building or renovation, it may take some meetings of the 5 of us in between meetings with him so that we can coalesce on our policies so that we can give him direction. We don't want to pay an attorney to sit and listen to us argue back and forth. He just needs our simple answers, and then he can do his work. So I want
Does
to,
that include public hearings?
we will have public hearings, of course, and
Because you may
that's a
have to
part of the
revise.
process. Absolutely. But I just want to admonish the commission that we do our work, maybe separately. It may require more meetings to get him the answers he needs, but we're not going to pay an attorney to sit and listen to us chat about stuff.
Well,
So,
if we each have a strong position, we don't have to always agree on everything.
Well, we're gonna have to agree enough. And again, I'll use the idea that my husband and I might disagree about how we want our house put together. We better come together, figure it out, and then give the contractor his instructions. And that's what we're doing here.
Well, he
with
would
this
be our,
process.
he would be our guide as to help us develop our goals.
No, we develop the goals and we give those to him.
No, I. that's what-
Confirm this, Austin, that we develop it and we give it to you and you do the language.
Yeah, I don't do policy. So the policy direction will come from you all. And my job, I think, is to take that policy and turn it into good law, turn it into a workable code. So I won't be the one telling you, hey, you must have affordable housing or you must allow this use or whatever it
We'll
is,
have
unless it's
to-
actually a legal requirement.
And the piece we need from you is what question you need to have answered, such as my contractor says, do you want this or do you want this? And then we have to come back to you and answer that question. So that's the guidance I think that would be given. Other comments, questions? Mike?
Well, I'm curious about affordable housing. We just shot down an affordable housing program down the road with tiny homes. We're not talking about tiny homes, are we?
No, I'm talking about existing homes that are tiny, that are disrepair, that people want to keep.
Well, I mean, if somebody was talking about affordable housing code, implying that we were gonna consider people coming in here building affordable housing, and we're not talking about tiny homes when we say
No.
affordable housing, are we?
Anything we're doing is future. It's not current. What's existing current, as we know from going through this code, it's when people come in and want to do
Want to do
something.
something
That's what
new.
we're writing code for. And Austin astutely noticed that our comprehensive plan included affordable housing.
Mhm.
So the policy he needs from us to come back to him and say, how do you want to do an affordable housing? Is it possible to do? And that will be the piece that's our job to do,
Mhm.
to tell him, yes, we do. Or maybe even say, Austin, yes, we want to do it. We have no clue how. Do you have a suggestion? So those would be,
That's good.
you know, kind of how that would happen. But we have to be very judicious with his time, and we will be.
I
Any other
appreciate that.
questions, comments?
I have a couple questions.
Go for it.
Austin, this is Nate. One thing I've noticed just working with the code is that sometimes we don't, as far as procedures, for instance, combination of parcels, we didn't really have a good process defined. And so I had to kind of research at the county level how they did it. And in our code, it was basically said, you have to follow a minor subdivision procedure, which then got very more complicated than it needed to be. So what, like, I'm just wondering, I guess, what do all of those things or situations need to be accounted for specifically in our code, or is there at some point to where we could reference perhaps like El Paso County procedures or something like that? Or is that something where we need to make sure, or maybe you have a template already that covers 99% or 95% of things that people need to do with their land?
Right. So generally procedures is something I probably would lay out in a bit of detail, and you probably, I would say you can expect to see a pretty beefed up procedures chapter from me on first draft. And that's just because it's inherently legal. It's inherently not policy oriented. You're telling me you want it really simple and streamlined. I can work that into the procedures, but something like allowing for what you described, I would probably call a replat, which is a really simplified version of a minor subdivision, essentially, would need its own procedure to be able to actually process that application. And so you could obviously do it under some big general form, like a minor subdivision, but that's a pretty old school way of doing it. So as far as the procedures, what I would probably do for you all, unless you tell me otherwise, is to just draft you a more modern set of procedures that are ultra simplified, ultra streamlined. And you guys can tell me, hey, we don't need that. No one ever combines lots here or whatever it is. So, hey, our major subdivision process, it needs to have a higher threshold than what you've drafted or whatever it is. Those kind of push and pull. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
One other question, since our next agenda item is talking about the zone codes as they have been presented to this point. Do you have any opinion on how that was drafted in the current draft, or just we don't have to decide anything now, obviously, but just kind of a high level opinion of how it's been presented so far?
Are you talking about your districts?
Yes, the new proposed zone districts.
They look to me to be ripped almost verbatim from your comprehensive plan. Is that not correct?
Right, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
So does that
So
make
I
sense?
wouldn't do it. Well, it depends. If they work for you, they work for you. I wouldn't do it this way for a couple of reasons. You're kind of pigeonholing yourself if you get this specific. For instance, instead of saying single and 2-family residential, I would probably rename that low density residential. And then you have your particular uses within that, and the predominant uses are probably going to be those really low density uses like a single family dwelling or a duplex, but there's probably going to be some other allowed uses in there. So I wouldn't start with naming your district what actually is an allowed use. I would describe what the district is trying to get after, which here I think is low density residential. And then same with these other districts here, like these last two really could be combined into one district, which is institutional and open space. Again, if it works for you, it works for you. And I don't want to mess something up that is working. So whenever something is working well, I want to hear that so that I don't touch it. But this probably isn't how I would go about it on first draft.
Austin, we're really open to that. I don't think that anything's working or not working for us at this point in time. So I think your suggestion is good.
Okay.
And then just to clarify, you would have all, like those charts that we've been working through, would have permitted uses or conditional uses or whatever for each district to further define it.
Yeah, you would still have, so you'd have a purpose statement for each district, and then you would have your use table. And I saw the markup of the use table in the draft that you sent over, Nate. And so I assumed that means your eyes have already been on it, which is great if that's the case, because I can just move those allowances over and add in uses as necessary. And if I'm changing anything in there, I can come up with some form of annotation. I could use track changes, although I prefer not to. I would probably use footnoting or something like that. That way you will be able to tell from your current draft of the land use table to the proposed draft what has changed. And hopefully that will expedite your review. But I'm assuming based off the red lines I saw and the draft I was sent, Nate, that the land use table has already been looked at by Planning Commission.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that will save me some time as well.
But Austin, I'm not sure that, we were concerned that possibly we were deleting things that maybe needed to stay there legally and so forth. So
Okay.
that's why we need you to help us.
Okay. I'll take a good look.
Yeah, you will need to.
Keep us safe.
I'll do my best.
And so by starting over with this organizational chart that you have, it's going to have all the legal points that we need to include. And then, okay. And that way we won't miss anything as you're dragging and dropping. If we've already thrown something out that needs to be put in there, it'll be included.
Yeah, and I don't think I saw any. I mean, I should spend more time on your comments, or I should say I will. I didn't see anything on your comments that you suggested throwing out that I thought, no, that really needs to be in there. But I'll be sure to keep that in mind if there is anything.
I think that's our main guidance that we've been lacking, and we were, apprehensive
Looking
that we
for.
didn't have it. Yes, looking for.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, anything else? Are we ready to let Austin get on with his evening? We all good? Todd, any questions? Okay. Austin, thanks again for taking time with us this evening. and we will be back in touch.
Thank you all. I'm excited for this project.
Thanks, Austin.
Great.
Okay, let's move to land use code alternatives. I have to start this discussion with the burning question that I hope that Nate and Becky can help us with. What is our budget for this?
So we've got a little bit left in the original grant as well as the matching funds from Kirkpatrick. Nate put together a spreadsheet for us. I would like to not use $39,000 to get this done.
Can you be specific though and start over? Like, what did we spend on the previous attorney and where did it come from? Just briefly.
Yeah, I can do that. It's total spent so far, $30,797.13. The total budget would be 70,000. That's if we assume there's 25 DOLA grant, there's the required town match, and then there's 20,000 from Kirkpatrick, because we're assuming that the other 25 of so the Kirkpatrick is $45,000. The assumption is that 25 of that would go into reimbursing the town for its match of the DOLA grant. So that leaves $20,000 of the Kirkpatrick money to be added into the total budget. So the total budget figure is 70,000, total spent $30,797.13, which means there's $39,202.86 remaining, 87 cents remaining.
So the 40,000 that you're describing is after we already pay the match that we have to spend. Is that correct?
But it would be also inclusive of any required publication costs, those other implementation pieces. Ideally, it would be great to be able to utilize some of that funding to produce some collateral materials to let the public know these are the changes, this is how it works, this is how it impacts, and to support that budget as well.
Was it always contemplated with the Kirkpatrick Foundation funds that they were to be used for matching? Was that the plan? Was that the whole idea of the Kirkpatrick funds?
It was to support this project, knowing that the town needed a match to be eligible for the DOLA grant.
Do you recall the hourly rate? I did not bring that with me, Lisa. Do you recall their hourly rate?
Austin's?
Yeah.
225.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I ran some quick figures. If it looks as though if everything were perfect and we needed 37 hours, such as the last small project that he worked on, it would be around just over $8,000 to be able to complete this project. When we had talked earlier, it kind of gave an estimate of about 100 hours. That still comes out to be just under $25,000 and still within budget. The nice thing about that is that I feel as though we can kind of work towards like that goal of 100 hours. I feel like, and knowing that if there are things that need more attention towards the end, let's keep the rolling count of our hours with the attorney. They'll be able to monitor that pretty easily, update us on time. And when we start approaching towards the end of it, we can really hone in and be very diligent with that remaining time and be able to predict if we're going to go over. Another thing that I think that I would recommend, off track, lost it. Here we go. And it's fleeted again.
You'll think of it. So it will be a challenge, I think, to keep this under 100 hours. Again, I'll use my analogy of the house. So the contractor gives you a quote, and how much more is it always than they say? And how much longer does it take? always. So that's how we have to look at this. And it's going to come down to this commission to move quickly and efficiently with our partner if we choose to do this. But this isn't a lot of money. It's just not a lot of money to try to finish this thing up. And basically, he, thank God, has a template that he can slot in there and not charge us for and begin working off of. And I think it'll be a miracle if that's all we spend. And if we get done by the end of the year, I think it'll be amazing and unbelievable. And I think it's going to cost more than we think it's going to cost. So
I think that's just why it's really important to kind of keep tabs on that. And as we're approaching that 100 hours, that's the fleet. There it came. The other thing too that I want to mention is like with any code, our municipal code that was recently adopted, we as staff, the board members, we're already identifying things where it needs to be cleaned up. This is going to be no different. We're going to have a working list of code cleanups that we're going to do periodically. So I commend you for the amount of work and effort that you've put into it to this point, but also know that the final draft always has an opportunity to be improved. So I don't want that to scare anybody away from those little things of sometimes things just have to be tested before we know whether or not they need to be amended.
what's really important is that this group creates a framework that can then build to those points. Rocco, did you have something you wanted to say?
So, I mean, cost is definitely a consideration, and like a house, it'll probably go over. It's good to have a goal in mind. But also we have to come up with what are our goals. So if we want affordable housing, that's going to increase cost. If we want fire mitigation, same thing. So we have to make choices as a group and decide what are our priorities. The other thing is time. So I look at September, 2 meetings, October, 2 meetings, November, 1 maybe, December 1, because of the holidays. So like 6 meetings. So detail wise, there's going to need to be some coordination and some efficiency. He should probably clear his schedule for those meetings, not be here for the whole meeting, but give us our task or assignment prior maybe. We come back, we have some discussion with him, he goes on his way, and then we continue to work.
Totally agree, Rocco. I feel like our goal should be to have this completed by the end of October so that we can have our public meetings that are required. And really, I'd like to see us finished by the end of October. So I think we need to commit to that. I think that'll help us stay focused, and depending on how much we want to discuss, argue, or whatever else, that's just however many meetings we have to have. Ann?
I was just going to say with Rocco, you think like a military man, and you think about the goal, what, and then what's your game plan, what's your war plan, what's your strategy, but you have to have not just the goal to finish the code, but what are the goals of the code, right?
He mentioned that in his comments.
And he was saying that. And that's the hardest part. That will help us tone it down, I hope. Because you're right, it's so complicated, it's crazy.
So the title of this discussion was alternatives. And I wanted to start it with budget so that we just know what are our alternatives? What can we do within this time frame, and what can we do within this budget? Different suggestions that I'm just going to throw out that have been made to me so that we can talk about alternatives is one suggestion was that I think we've already gotten deadline extensions from DOLA. Is that correct? Twice. The suggestion was made to me that if we asked, since we've had a huge turnover in this commission, that we could ask for training from DOLA, a half-a-day training to teach us about land use code, which a lot of us don't have experience with. And that many times they would be more open to another extension when you go to them and ask for help they're like really happy about that a lot of times and are interested in helping you and give you an extension. If you explain, we're all new, we're kind of starting this over, we need some training, blah, blah, blah. That's one alternative. Second alternative. If we were able to get a deadline extension, we could send the RFQ to companies who are more consultant than attorney, and they bring in attorneys as needed. I don't know that we could get any better pricing than what we've already got with this group. But there are companies like that that are more focused on consulting. And I think that's something a lot of us were concerned since we'd used an attorney and kind of it was a big mess. We were interested in more using a consultant. I think we have a hybrid here with a guy who at least has 2 years of consulting. But anyway, that's a second alternative. Third is consultants with the combination of attorneys, which we're looking at tonight. Attorneys only, that's a fourth one. Fifth one is I was just trying to think of alternatives. In all the grants that I've read, I've never seen the Planning Commission ever mentioned. Planning Commission could completely step out of this process and have staff take over or whatever. So that's a fifth alternative. Throwing ideas out, happy to listen to others.
What was that last?
The Planning Commission completely steps out of this process. We're not qualified to do it. We have no training, and hand it to the staff and let them figure it out. That's an alternative. Any other alternatives anybody can think of? Mike liked that one.
Can I comment on that one?
Go for it.
So I mean, certainly this is not a typical role of a planning commission. Typically you would be a partner, right? You came into this and that's why a great deal of gratitude. It's a headache. Land use code is no easy subject to try to analyze, particularly with, even for well-trained people, it's still very challenging. So, you know, everything that you've done really does make a difference. And I think that that's why staff really wanted to have your input. That's why the board, upon approving this code, will do so with much more confidence, knowing that you have played a part in it and it's something that you're happy with. I think that the exercise itself is really valuable to you as you move forward as planning commission members. Some of you are new, some of you have been around the block a few times. And so, you know, it's all part of the process of learning. And I think we all just need that little push to get us to the finish line. I think we're so close.
Comments?
And we don't have a professional planner on staff.
So are you saying that you really
Neither
don't want to do it either?
Neither do we.
You know, I think that we can certainly do it, but it's better with you. It's better having those pain points that are discussed, that you guys are identifying. I think staff definitely plays a role in it from the practitioner standpoint of now, okay, this decision's been made. We have to implement it. We have to review applications. I really think that this is an effort in concert to be able to have a really good project. Sure. Could staff do it? We can have something ready for the board to review.
Now,
But is it a good product?
that would be,
That's a huge claim to make after what we've been through.
It's,
I find that hard to believe.
would it be helpful if we had a joint meeting with the trustees? You know, more, because they're going to have to know what's going on too.
And the trustees, this is a public meeting. The trustees are welcome to come to each and every meeting. Love to have them. Todd has been here every single time.
mean,
He
it's-
hasn't missed one of our meetings.
I mean,
So-
officially, you know, you've said.
We're official. This is an open meeting. We can't get more official than
No,
this.
I meant an organizement, so there.
This is organized. We
I think-
publicize it.
I think you're talking about a work session that would be
Session where we're all just
collaborative between the two
Well, why
groups.
don't you do brainstorming with your trustees.
Let me just
Have
say
us all do it
this.
Together.
Let me go back to my house. If I invite all the neighbors in to comment on what my husband and I are trying to decide to do about this house, it's going to take me about 10 years to build a house. So I think we do our work, we do it efficiently. Anyone's welcome to join us. Anyone's welcome. We have comment, we have public comment. And the more that we bring people into this process while we're at this stage, the more difficult it is and the more expensive and more time we use. We bring people into the project as public comment is appropriate. And we'd love to have every single member of BOT sitting right out there in those chairs and commenting. Love, love, love to have them. But we've got to get the work done. We are the workhorses. Unless we decide on a different alternative tonight, we are the workhorses that have to get this done, and we have to get it done efficiently. So let's go back to our alternatives. What would y'all like to do this evening? Commissioners?
So I am new in this project. I think we are under a time constraint. I think there's also budget considerations. And so I think we work in concert with the attorney, Austin, with the goal to be complete in November. I don't know if we can hit October.
Okay, I like to
November.
I like to under promise and over deliver in every part of my life. So my goal, I would love it for us to have, is the end of September. Your goal you'd like to have is the end of November, correct?
Well, I think the money has to be obligated and committed by the end of December. If we continue on our process, I believe there might be some of the Kirkpatrick money that could still be on the table for use.
That's technically correct, but the grant requires a final approval of a new land use code
But there's no
to be
final.
successful.
Okay, which grant are you talking about? DOLA or are you
The
talking?
DOLA.
DOLA
So-
requires an approval by December 20.
No, it
Okay.
required there after December 31st, there's a 90-day period in which we could hold all the meetings and do all the board, public hearings. And so technically things wouldn't have to be, it's a closeout period. It's a 90-day closeout period. The December 31st deadline is for spending of funds on consultant work.
But board has to adopt by the 31st.
No.
Okay,
board
that
has to
process
adopt
could
in
occur
90
within 90
days.
days.
within 90 days. Got it. Okay.
So you can't get the Kirkpatrick money until after?
He's still, he's talking about the DOLA. That was the DOLA.
Well, that's DOLA
qualifications.
and Kirkpatrick. I'm still confused as to why,
It's all reimbursed expenses. That's how.
and it could be going as we go along. We could be drawing on the Kirkpatrick people too. Okay.
Do they require adoption as well?
They'll require some reporting.
Okay.
And that's, as far as, involving the trustees, what I would recommend doing is really just, when you're towards the end of the product. And it's something that staff can help facilitate too. If you give us a kind of the high points, the highlights, or if you'd like to present them yourself these are the changes of the code and and I think staff would like to be involved in that just because these are some of the pain points that have been taken away administratively from staff, simplified processes, procedures, and compile that just into a report for the boards that they can take into consideration as they're going through adoption procedures.
I think we would like staff to create the high points and that'll help y'all become familiar with it as well.
Mhm.
So I like your idea of getting a short little crash course on land use code. I think that would be worth our time if we could get a few hours of that rather than the 3 hours. I mean, we've already spent a lot of time and we're just swimming. I am. And then use Austin to help as kickstart and to guide us.
So who's our DOLA representative?
We are currently 3 deep in vacancies. Clay, our regular representative, regional manager, had retired. They'd given us an interim. Greg, who's also retired. He was covering 2 regions. Then they gave both of those regions to Christy, who has moved on. So currently they are severely understaffed. They probably have 2 DOLA regional managers covering the entire state right now. And I don't
my
necessarily feel as though that would be the most appropriate source of information. Those DOLA reps, they know a lot of stuff, but neither of them, nobody in that particular seat would be my first choice of giving you a planning and land use 101. However, there is, she was the former planner for the town of Ridgeway. And prior to that, worked for the Department of Local Affairs. She was their planner under their Main Street program. She's since moved on, is no longer with either of those communities, and is somewhat freelancing. So I feel as though an appropriate use of some of these funds for the implementation of this land use would be able to contract with her. I don't anticipate that it would end up being too much, but I can certainly figure out or find out, reach out and find out if that's something that she would be available to do very soon. And what that cost would be and sort of what that would, what her vision of that would include.
That would be helpful information. Is there anyone on the commission besides Lisa that would be willing to attend such a training?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So
I think
we
it
have
would
interest.
improve our efficiency. It's all about efficiency.
Maybe there's a.
Yeah.
land use planning for them or something.
And it looks like there's a number of webinars available as well that look like they are free gratis.
That's what we're looking for. Okay. Todd, could you provide that information to us? Okay.
Is that public? Is that public or are you logged in? Okay, perfect.
Okay. All right. So, Rocco has said that he thinks it'd be a good idea for us to use Austin and that law firm and work on a date for the end of November. Is that correct?
I didn't say end of November. I don't think we want to look at this at Thanksgiving.
No,
So
we don't.
let's just say the first meeting in November.
Okay, by the first meeting, be finished as much as possible. Anybody else, alternatives that you'd like to vote for, or you'd like to, or propose another one? Well, Mike, what do you think about Rocco's suggestion?
I like it.
You like it?
Mm.
Lisa?
I say yes. Yes,
Okay.
of
All
course.
right. So my understanding is, since we already have a contract with this law firm, our town already has a contract with this law firm, that we do not have to get approval via BOT on this, and we can move forward. That is my understanding.
That is correct. And if I could make a suggestion, what I can do is take your list of meeting dates as sort of a template for the progress that needs to occur and see if Austin would be willing to populate it with a list of milestones.
That's a great idea, Becky. That's perfect. And basically, I can get you that list. I'll do it. I wonder if there's any way we can, since he estimated 100 hours, is there any way we could get a contract with, we already have a contract with the firm, but get a contract where there's a cap or anything like that, that we could just sort of cap it at the 100 hours? I mean, he's telling us maybe 37, so
I think let's shoot for 100.
can we get a
Really.
cap in writing, do you think? from them?
We can cease the project after 100 easily. And so I just preemptively let them know if this is something that you all wanted to pursue, that we would want to account for his hours separately working on this project. Because we need to be able to have that documentation for the reimbursability of the grant. So we will continue to monitor that. I think as Nate and I see those invoices coming in, we'll just do a check. And I think it would be good to, look at the hours in comparison to where we are on a timeline and be able to anticipate more or needing to,
Speed it up, should,
yeah.
slow it
be
down,
more
whatever.
Efficient.
Yeah. How quickly are they getting invoices to you? Because we need to be kind of real time with this so that we can manage it real time.
They're very efficient.
Are they?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And they're willing to, if we want bills sooner, they're willing to give them to us.
I mean, honestly, I'd love to have a bill
They don't-
weekly.
they're no
I'll
shy.
have, Austin at the very least give us a hour update weekly so that we can monitor. those
Yes.
hours.
Yeah, even if they don't turn in the invoice. Okay, that's fine. All right, next on our, do we need to vote on this? We've had a voice vote. I think we're pretty clear we want to move forward with this.
I would suggest an official motion. just
Okay,
to-
I need a motion.
Rocco, repeat your motion.
I move to continue the land use code rewrite using the specialist Austin Flanagan with the town attorney's office.
Second, do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Nay. Okay, I think it passes unanimously. I think we're there. I was told that BOT needs to be informed. So can we get that? How would we do that?
We can just add this to our staff report.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, next on our agenda. Presentation of preliminary zoning summary. This is probably going to change. So Todd, do you want to go over this or do we need to?
Yeah, this is basically just done off of what's currently in your draft material. So yeah, go on to the next one. Of course, everything in here is draft. Are you having?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, based on the discussion we just had, we may change some of the zones and things. And so I wonder if it wouldn't be appropriate to table the discussion.
We have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
Yeah, whatever.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for doing all your work, Todd. I appreciate it. I think it made it simpler probably for Austin to just review it, if nothing else.
Yeah,
So,
and I kind of, like I said, he had some good ideas.
Yeah.
So.
all right. I would also like to table section 8D, continued review of land code draft, because since we're headed in this other direction, we're going to have plenty of time for going over that. 8D as in dog, or actually 9D, sorry, 9D as in dog. I'd like to table that as well because there's no point in going over.
We have an old one. It keeps going.
There's no point in going over all the land use code as we've been doing week after week. Let's let Austin do his work. And then our focus more appropriately is policy. And maybe we could use our time this evening. It seems like the affordable housing was a huge issue. Maybe we could discuss that a little bit to see sort of where everybody is on it. And then fire mitigation, if there's any further discussion we need there so that we can get a head start on what our policy feelings are as a commission. Let's start with the affordable housing. Evidently that is in the comprehensive plan. That was something that the citizens said they wanted, affordable housing. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
The background on that was it's something that Dick Bratton pushed to get included in the plan. So when the plan was adopted 3 years ago, there was, I think if you look at there's no meat and potatoes, it's just kind of lip service in the comprehensive plan. It's kind of a placeholder. A few years ago, there was discussion on what did affordable housing mean. There's a HUD definition, but it's a moving target because it's individual. It's how much an individual spends on the HUD definition, I think it's 30% of their pay for housing. So if you're making 100,000, well, you have a bigger amount than if you are getting tips down at the pantry. So it is a moving target. I think one of the factors that affects affordable housing, there was an article in the AP today, and they were looking at Steamboat Springs. One of the factors is short-term rentals, because you have speculators come in, and sometimes investment groups come in, and that can push up the price of housing and make it relatively less affordable than if you had no short-term rentals. So short-term rentals have a play in that. But I think it all comes down to how you define affordable housing, and that can be problematic. I think, given our goal for November, I would recommend that we don't spend time or money addressing affordable housing on this go through for the code.
Other thoughts?
Well, I think we could, I agree with you. It's tricky because everyone has a definition. So I made my point to Austin that we have some very old houses that are not fancy, lots of bathrooms and, things like that, that if we can help preserve those reasonably, that's affordable. That's part of my thought.
I have a quick question, and I appreciate the historical point of view, Rocco. Do you know what Bratton's thought process or intent was with wanting to include that?
I don't know if he saw the writing on the wall. I mean, it was an issue. I mean, when we were redoing the comprehensive plan, we started that process like 5 years ago. And the writing was on the wall. It's just become that much more of an issue. I don't know if it's because he spent every morning down at the pantry and they were having turnover for employees. I don't know. It is a buzzword. It is important, but I think it takes a lot of time. And in the sake of time, I'm not sure we want to dedicate our resources for that. We did talk about tiny houses. There were a couple of proposals several years ago about tiny houses coming in. And that didn't make a lot of sense just based on the needs for land and septic system, right? Because you're paying premium for a piece of property and then you're just going to put a tiny house. It's kind of contradictory because most people who want a tiny house want to downsize and save cost. I don't see how you do that in Green Mountain Falls. So tiny houses didn't make it in the comp plan. I think affordable housing, it should be addressed. I think there's incentives that the town could potentially do for certain developers or properties, whether they're tax breaks, things like that, but it would be working in concert with the county as well. So there are ways to incentivize affordable housing. Do those make it into the code? I don't think necessarily they do.
Yeah, it's probably not appropriate. Mike, Lisa, thoughts?
I agree.
Yeah, I kind of agree too.
Let's let
because-
Mike have a turn.
Oh,
just
you're
a
going to
second.
say something? I'm sorry.
I'm not much in favor of promoting affordable housing in this town. I mean, I don't know what the definition would be, but to incentivize people coming in and putting in affordable housing in a town like this, I just don't think we're equipped for it. It doesn't fit the style and everything else that this town has. And if they want to live more affordably, let them go to Woodland Park or somewhere else. But I don't think we ought to focus a whole lot of energy and attention on trying to create affordable housing or incentivize it.
We really don't have the space for it. That's
No.
the big issue that I see, that it's kind of impossible. Where would you put it? Okay, I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that that's not something that we really want to focus on. If somebody wants to figure out something creative later and bring it in, that's something I guess that could be addressed at a later point.
Mhm. So we don't want high-rise apartments and stuff like that either, or condos or all those things either. I mean, that's cheaper than building a house. But we don't want those either.
I think that's a separate issue.
Oh, I thought it was kind of ballpark.
Okay, fire mitigation. Austin has written fire mitigation code for areas, smaller areas, I think, is my understanding. So I'd love to see sort of what he would put together for our area. We obviously need it. And I think it's pretty important. Others?
As we were here, I kind of already looked at Larimer County and what he wrote. And there's, I mean, it's pretty detailed about fireworks and different kinds of things. It's easy to look at. And it's not that many pages, so. I agree. I think he'll probably be able to summarize it for us and get it figured out.
I would just like to mention too that I've participated in comprehensive plans since the first one. And my husband and I, my late husband and I participated in the last one. And fire mitigation was a late sister. And Jerry and I pushed it, and Dick brought along too, because it snuck up on people. You know, things sneak up. But, and I'm just disappointed that, you know, when we've put out comprehensive things and surveys, maybe 15 or 20 people respond. I just find that so sad. I don't know how we can make that better, because people do have opinions, but they don't say it where we can hear it.
What are the other thoughts about fire mitigation being included in the code?
Well,
Mike or Rocco?
I think we should do it.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've got to.
Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Mhm.
so we're in agreement about that. So that's more guidance we can give him. Thank y'all for participating in that tonight. Is there any other business that's important that y'all feel like we should discuss this evening?
Let's see here. What did I-
If we can be all this clear about policy as we were tonight, this should move quickly.
Oh, I had a question. I had to leave the last meeting early. And I think, was it Todd or Nate said that the historic preservation section is gone? We decided not to use that one at all. Is that correct?
Not that I know of.
Mm-mm.
I think we left it in to possibly revisit. I don't think we axed the whole
Well,
thing.
that's one that I'm concerned about.
All right, that's another policy discussion we can have. Ann, what is your
Mhm.
thought about historic preservation?
Well, I don't want it to be so severe that people can't keep their homes. That's what I'm worried about. Okay, that's all I have to say tonight.
All right, anybody else have comments about historic preservation?
I don't think there's much, if anything, in the current code for historic preservation.
Mm,
I think there was mention of potentially having a district in one of the drafts or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that's necessary, because there's scattered cabins that are historical all throughout, but do we know if we have anything on the historic register in town?
No, I don't think there's anything. This was proposed as an overlay, so it could go over any other zone district in town, and then you could have provisions in
There-
addition to whatever that base zone district is. So
I-
I think there was there hasn't been a really clear.
It was something else in
discussion,
the comprehensive plan, I think, that was mentioned as an interest. So I don't even know what that looks like either.
The other,
It's very draconian in certain ways.
It can be, it just depends on how you write it, but yeah.
I think
He
if our,
can help us with that. I'm sorry.
I think if our goal is to simplify, we ignore it in this revision.
Good.
Mike, you were going to say something?
I agree. I just, I would hate to pass a bunch of code that forces people to do something that they either don't want to do or can't afford. It just seems like if you own a piece of property and you want to keep it historical, fine, and if you don't, that's none of our business.
Lisa?
I agree.
I think Becky wants to speak.
I think that there's a way to write it in that doesn't include that. And just as an example, to play devil's advocate, because you're under Pikes Peak Regional Building Department here. What would be required is if somebody was to try to do a remodel on a building that is historic and they would like to retain that historic character, that remodel might trigger them bringing it up to code to accommodate certain ADA accessibility, et cetera. Allowing certain buildings. I think that you can do it on a case by case basis that could be owner initiated. That if the owner would like to have that building designated locally as a historic building, that you all could consider that, the board could consider that for local designation on a case by case basis, to where then potentially they would be able to apply for certain variances based upon that designation. I think that it's worth having that conversation with what ifs with Austin. I have some resources that I'm happy to share
Yeah.
just on that specifically.
Okay, that'd be great.
One
Please
thing
do.
I might mention, I think they got repair money for the gazebo doing that. It was quite a process to get that all approved and to get the right materials to keep it historic. That's all.
And the gazebo is no longer historic,
Mhm.
because the island wasn't faced with the same materials.
Oh, is
They
that
used those formed, basically
Yeah.
concrete Lego blocks around
So it
the
didn't-
wall.
Oh,
So
you couldn't-
once upon a time with Robert King, he pursued that. And then
Mhm.
when the last improvements were made, those all got scrapped.
And so it's gone. Well, the little what is it called? Land office. This is an interesting story about our wonderful benefactors. Perkins, I can't think of her name, the historic, society in Woodland. She mentioned to Mr. Cassie that it needed money and he wrote her a check for $36,000
To
to
replace the
fix it
roof.
up,
To
just
replace
out
the
of his own kindness. So,
So on the historic, we would be, from what I'm hearing, we would be open to having that overlay district as long as it's at the owner's choice to participate, that nobody's forced or
Yes.
anything like that. Am I right in what
Yes.
I've heard?
Yeah, if an owner wants to come in and get it designated, that's fine, but I don't think we ought to designate it against an owner's wishes.
Absolutely.
okay.
And again, it would be kind of, if he's already got code written for that, we don't want him spending a bunch of time on it. That's for sure. Yes,
Yeah.
Lisa.
And my only point is that history is what Green Mountain Falls is. I mean, it's just such that's part of our flavor. And so I think that we should discuss it, as Becky mentioned, but maybe not restrict it, but I think it should be. History here is important.
Oh, it is, one thing.
Becky, if, please, we would like it if you would
Mhm.
provide
Mhm.
whatever your resources are. I don't want to belabor the topic. I think we've covered it. I'm about ready to finish this meeting unless somebody has some more new business. Are we good? We stand adjourned.